Hi and welcome. I'm Carolina Bravo, luxury real estate broker and founder of the 212 Bravo team at Sirhan in New York City. I'll be your host of this exciting new podcast, Global Digs. Each week, I'll interview top real estate professionals from around the world and we'll explore their home market. In this episode, I have a very special guest directly from Germany. His name is Patrick Breuer. He's the founder and CEO of his own company. But how about if he introduces himself? Patrick, welcome.
Hi, and welcome. Nice to be here, and also thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share this with our subscribers and listeners. Do you remember when you saw my post on LinkedIn and you say, hey, how about Germany?
Yeah, I think it was beginning or mid of November, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Quite some weeks ago, but I'm happy to be here right now.
It's just
And
fantastic.
also thank you for inviting me and be the representative of
Of Germany
Germany.
real estate. Absolutely. Also, if you can share with us a little bit about your company, how you started in real estate, and also how's the market, the real estate market in Germany right now?
Yeah, perfect. Let's start with the name of the company. I
Yes.
think that's the biggest challenge for non-Germans because it's a pretty German name. So in German in German it's called Mietshausverkaufen, which basically means you're selling any kind of investment properties. That's the translation of that. And I started with that company beginning of 2022. So it's about to turn one
Oh, wow.
in a few weeks.
Congrats.
And
Congrats.
yeah, thank you. And yeah, the way how I got into real estate is I studied and also worked in a bank. So I'm a classical banker, so to say. So I'm rather coming from the more financial and banking side. Um,
Oh, that's
and
great.
then once I did my MBA, which at the university where I studied, they were pretty famous. Still pretty famous for the startup business, especially in Germany and Europe. And yeah, so I got my way into Berlin, and then I started working at several startups. Yeah, and also on the banking and finance side, and I turned more from the banking and finance side to the loan business, so to say. So I started more in the private segment, so consumer loans, and then I turned into mortgage loans.
Wow.
And that was basically the way I got into real estate. And I think, and that's my hypothesis, the better you know how to finance and get the mortgage loans, the better you are in
Yes.
real estate, because most of the time it has a very close connection.
And that's exactly why you are my guest, because how knowledgeable you are. I mean, nothing like someone who understands the process to represent, especially international investors, right? Some of them, they don't necessarily are local experts, and they need to be a little bit of the, hand holding throughout the process. They need to have someone that have the expertise in every aspect of the transaction along the way. And I have a question. So let's say that an investor is interested in buying in Germany, but doesn't necessarily know where to go first to find that dream vacation home or investment property. Where would that investor need to go? Tell us about a website.
Yeah, so that's a pretty fair question. And I would say even German people, they don't know where to buy properties. So pretty good first question here.
Yes.
So I mean, there are a few platforms that are operated in Germany, and normally those platforms they can be found in the internet. So there are platforms like in German it's called Immobilien Scout, Immobilienwelt. There's also eBay Kleinanzeigen. Those are I would say, the most famous platforms where you can find the properties listed. That's the normal way, I would say. But, and this is important to understand,
Please.
most people, they don't know that especially those properties that are listed on those platforms, most of the time they're pretty expensive. So you need to watch out if you really go to those platforms, because it could be that you find a nice property but still highly overpriced. And on top of that, there are also smaller platforms that rarely people know. And I think this is also a good way. There are lots of brokers in Germany where you can find properties that are not listed on those platforms. So typically off-market deals.
Yes.
And I would say this is where you can find the attractive deals, I would say.
So it sounds like it always go back to, having that local expert. So, and it sounds like you're very knowledgeable about this. So if someone wants to find you because they like, and they have subscribed to this channel and they want to connect with you, so they learn a little bit more about the local market in Germany, where can they find you?
That's pretty easy. I would say you can find me on LinkedIn. That's a platform where I am super active,
That's
I
where
would say.
I found you. That's where we found each other. Yes, LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
We also have a YouTube channel.
I've seen those videos. You are quite the pro, I have to say. So that's great. Awesome. Okay. How easy is it for an investor to purchase in Germany? Walk us a little bit about the process from locating the property to putting an offer, and what else can you share?
You mean international investors, or dependent on from where you are?
International investors. Okay, that's a good question. So give us an example of an American investor versus a European investor. If there's any difference during the purchase process.
Yeah, I would say the main difference is at the very end of the process, especially when it comes to the applying for a mortgage loan. But let's start at the very beginning. So first of all, the very first thing that you need to do, and I guess it's the same in every country, you need to find the property.
Yes.
And as you asked already, where can I find those properties? So reach out to those platforms, brokers, or me via LinkedIn. And I think it's vital to understand what kind of property you want to buy. So most of the time, you either buy the property for yourself, or you buy to let those properties. And I think it's important to understand which way you want to go. And I would say I'm rather more on the buy to let side. As I said, the name of the company and so on is more for investors. So you really need to understand what kind of properties work out for you. And then figure this one out, if the property is actually having a positive cash flow, or is making money, because that's why you buy such properties.
That's the whole point.
And then
yes. I say that's the whole point of an investment, right? We want to make sure that it's going to be income producing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so once you found the property, meaning online or offline, the next step would be actually to do the visit and understand and check if the pictures of the property that you get via the broker or the internet is actually the way the property looks, because most of the time, maybe not most of the time, but sometimes you see like a really nice property, and then once you're there, it turns out to be a really shitty property.
Right.
So really important to go there. And sometimes you also have the chance to speak to the tenant, for example, and then you get some more information about the property, maybe some information about what's good, what's not so good, to really understand it.
You were saying about you have to know the type of property you are investing in. How many type of properties are there in Germany? For example, here in New York, we have condo, co-ops, townhouses. What kind of type of properties are there to invest?
I mean, in the end, it all comes down to, I would say, like 3 different properties. So either you buy an entire apartment building, and I think this is the main difference to New York. For example, here in Berlin, you can buy entire buildings, which consist of 10 or 15 or 20 single apartments, but then you're buying it all at once. So you don't have those big skyscrapers as you have in New York, for example.
Right.
And the second type would be you just buy a single apartment. And of course, there you have some subcategories like really small apartments, bigger apartments, loft houses, etc. But I would all put them into one category, being apartment. And then the third category is a family house, which normally is just one house, I mean, being alone or with other houses in a row.
Right.
But that's typically not like an apartment which is in an entire building. So you just have that one single house.
Okay. Well, that's great
I think that's a good
information.
way to differentiate them.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Now I'd like to move into price and prices. Can you give us an idea of how much would an investor and expect to pay for, let's say, one of those single units or townhouses?
Yeah, that's not that easy to answer, because in the end, it's a question of where you want to buy it,
Okay.
and even let's say you decide for a specific city. Let's take Berlin, because that's the place where I live. I mean, even in Berlin, you can buy an apartment in the heart of Berlin or in the outskirts of Berlin, and then the prices they vary differently, and quite tremendously, so to say. So as you ask, what's the price? Not that easy
Right.
to answer, but you can basically say, um, I mean, the most affordable ones, maybe not in
Mm-hmm.
Berlin, but in other cities, you can even find properties starting from 60 or 70,000 euros, which is roughly the same
Mm-hmm.
in US dollars. Um, and then, of course, it's open end. You can really find nice loft houses that are more than 1 million. So
So it really
not
comes.
that easy to answer.
Yes, it comes down is like same here in New York. Location, 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 right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So when it comes to location, what are the best neighborhoods or best cities and then neighborhoods to buy in Germany?
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to share one
Yes,
additional thing
please.
to the
Sure.
previous question. So the average housing prices in Germany is roughly a quarter million, so 250,000. To give you an
Wow.
impression, like where do we stand? That's roughly the average price, I would say.
Wow.
So coming to where to invest.
Yes.
So in Germany, there are we're speaking of the big seven. And what I mean here is you have 7 cities which are, uh, in terms of a real estate investment, the most attractive, because everyone speaks about those cities. So just to name them, it's Berlin, it's Düsseldorf, Frankfurt, Hamburg, Cologne, Munich, and Stuttgart. Those are the big 7 cities, and it's like with every investor, for example, investing in stocks, everyone wants to invest in those hot markets.
Yes.
And I would say the hottest of those markets is actually Berlin, but it's also super tricky in terms of like political discussions and so on.
Hmm.
So there's lots of things going on right now. And then Munich, also a big city in Germany. I would say Munich is the place where the prices are the highest. And then also in terms of the yields that you want to make, I would say Munich is not the best place to invest. And then if you also want to go to other cities, for example, Düsseldorf is really interesting. And also, of course, you can always take the heart of those cities, but also the outskirts, which is in terms of yields are super attractive. This is more on the macro level. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, micro level, there are different questions that you have to ask, but I would really watch out for neighborhoods that are growing.
Mm-hmm.
I would watch out for the yields, or the multiples. I think this is also an important KPI in Germany, same probably in New York. And I would always ask myself the question, do you still want to live in that neighborhood in 10 years from now on?
Right.
And if you really can answer the question with yes, then it's probably a good place to invest.
Yes, but we have to keep in mind some of these investors, they're not even living those properties, right? They're looking for that yield, which we call here a cap rate, or they're also looking to rent it out, right? And
Yeah.
with that in mind, if I buy a property, let's say it cost me $250,000, okay, how much can I rent that property for?
You mean in terms of the monthly
Yes,
rent that you have to pay?
correct.
Depends a little bit on the location.
Of course.
Again,
Location,
location.
location.
Yeah, but we can do some math here. So I would say in like super hot places, the multiples of those apartments, they came down over the last months, but right now I would say there are something between 20 to 25 in like super hot places, which is insane because a few months ago, those multiples, they were still at 30, 35, even 40. So you can see the prices and the multiples, they came down because of the crisis that we have right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, the yearly rent is roughly, as I said, like a multiple of 20. And then we can do the math here. So
Oh, I love math. Let's do
if
some
you
math.
have, if you, as I said, like 250,000 euros, and then the yearly rent would be 12,500, and then if you divide that by 12 months, you have a monthly net rent of roughly 1,100 euros.
That's not bad. That's
which
a good yield.
is compared to New York, I guess.
Hey, watch
low.
out! Hey! No, I hear you. That's great. Thanks for that. So we were talking. You just mentioned something about what we're going through, and that is across the board. Pretty much, I think the whole global economy. It's like in a kind of like, are we heading into a recession? We're not heading into a recession. And how is Germany market doing? And this is the real estate market. Are you guys on a pause? Have you already taken the hit of this recession talk? What can you share?
First of all, I would say that America as an entire country is on the driver's seat, so to say. And Germany is always looking to America and trying to figure out what happens there and what happens to us then.
Right.
And why do I say that? Because right now there are some experts that says we are in a recession in Germany, but then there are also some other experts that say we aren't in a recession. But what I can say is that the market conditions for real estate is really rough right now, because we're coming from a point where prices for properties increased tremendously over the last 10 years. So just to give you a number, over the last 10 years, on average, you can see, and there are also some reports on that, but I would say like over the last 10 years, we saw more than 100%,
Wow.
like roughly 120% price increases. And then comparing that to the last few months, we actually see a negative 7% right now. And this is important to mention. I mean, the data that we have right now is not, it's never up to date because it takes some time to get the data. So if I say we're talking about a negative 7%, we're considering data that is from the last year, probably from Q3. Some data points might be from Q4, but I would say it's Q3. And right now, what you can see is there is kind of a market freeze. So in the mid of 2022, we saw real estate prices on its peak. And since then, we see that prices for properties are rather on a downwards trend. And of course, as in every market environment, yes, there are experts that predict the future. Some speaks about a negative 50% prices, some say just 30%. Some say, well, there will be a neutral development. I think over the next probably 6 months, we'll definitely see something between 10 and 20% negative percentage rate. And I think the biggest challenge that we have right now is, so you have two parties, the one being the owner and the one being the potential buyer. The owner of a property, he is still on the level of mid 2022. So he says, well, I can sell my property for a multiple of 30, 35, 40, because there are people who are eagerly looking to get into real estate. But then on the other side, we have those investors, and they, like if they want to buy, they have to refinance and get the mortgage loan. And right now you're paying roughly 4% interest plus 2% repayment. So in total 6% of the property. So in the end, you have to get roughly 6% net yield for that property. And if you really do the math and you calculate like 100 divided by 6, you get to a multiple of 16.
Right.
So the owner says, I want to sell for a factor of 30, 35, and then the buyer says, I just give you a factor of 16. Mm-hmm. So it's roughly 50% of that. So what happens then is nobody wants to buy because you make a negative return on the investment. And in the end, there are no transactions happening because the owner, he or she doesn't want to go below the price. Right. And then the buyer says, well, that's too expensive. We don't find a compromise here because the difference is way too high. And that actually leads to like market freeze right now. And you can ask like all kinds of expert banks and so on. They definitely see prices, market transactions, and so on. It's really coming down.
It's almost as if I'm talking to another colleague here in New York City. Pretty much the same scenario.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we have the seller on one side, not really just yet to, adjust the price. And then we have the buyer or investor saying, hey, I know the market is here. I'm not going to be overpaying for this just in this market, right? So kind of a little bit disconnection there, which results in the market freeze that you are talking about. That's great information. But, let's talk about those all cash investors that come with a bag of money right out of the bank and say, hey, I do not care about those interest rates. If anything, this is music to my ears. I'm ready to put my money to work. Okay, so wouldn't you say that this is like the best time to invest in Germany or in New York? I mean, I know it's great to invest in New York.
It's funny that you say that because it's a typical discussion that we have with our customers and owners of properties right now. I always do the math like we did.
Yes.
And then they say, yeah, but there are people who have lots of equity and I want to sell to those people. And yeah, you can do that. And I still think there are lots of people with lots of cash on their accounts. But those people, they have the cash on their accounts because they know how to invest.
Of course.
So just ask yourself, why should you invest into a highly overpriced property right now if you can go to the next seller and he asks maybe just for like 20 or 30% of the price, and then you get a better yield. So the point I want to raise here is there are equity investors, but they are not dumb. They do the math maybe even better than those people who has to finance, and they know that they have a lot of bargaining power right now.
That's exactly
so they can say like, I'm going to buy it, but you have to come down with the price. And probably they might pay a little premium on the properties because they don't have the cost for the loan and so on. But in the end, they won't overpay like 100% more of what those people want to invest that need to finance.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, the whole point of being an investor, these are savvy international investors. They know what they're doing. They know the math inside out. And this is why we're here, right? Real estate brokers, top real estate brokers, is to educate our sellers or our investor, depending on which side of the table you are, and say, hey, yes, I know this is not the price that you were looking to, to net, but this is where the market is at, and these people are ready, willing, and able to pay cash for your property. And that's great advice. Now, let's move a little bit more to the aspect of being an investor, international investor. Do
Mhm.
an investor who is not from Germany needs a visa?
Easy answer, no.
Oh, nice. Okay. So tell me
I
more.
would say Germany is a heaven for international investors because you can buy pretty easy real estate in Germany. So you don't need like any visa. You don't even need to live here.
Mm-hmm.
Like wherever you are, you can buy. And we have that quite often that people from abroad, they come to us and say like, I want to invest. And then we can definitely watch out for nice properties.
That's
And
great.
definitely makes sense also for international investors because like if you invest in other countries, the yield might be much better. For example, people from Turkey, China, whatever, I would say the yield for real estate in those countries is much lower compared to Germany. So
Right.
it definitely makes sense to invest in Germany.
What about taxes? Does an investor need to pay real estate taxes? What can you share with us?
So of course, there's also the flip side. As I said, you don't need a visa, but and this is the other side. If you want to invest as a foreigner and you also want to get a mortgage loan, and we can come to that later as well, this
Mm-hmm.
might be not that easy.
Mm.
So you also ask for taxes, and I think Germany is also known for a tax country,
Uh-huh.
so asking for lots of taxes. And yeah, definitely you have to pay the taxes. So there is one tax that you have to pay. It's called Grunderwerbsteuer, so meaning the tax that you have to pay to the country once you buy a property, and
Mm.
that you have to pay, and it doesn't really matter where you live.
So all these info so far, which is great, brings me to my last question, which is I am an international investor. I'm not from Germany. Let's say I come from New York. I want to buy. So I know, number one, I need to locate the asset, the property, and then put my team together. And what I mean by my team, I'm talking about, who is going to be sitting on my side of the negotiating table to work that deal in the best terms for me. Who would you say are the top people that needs to be on your side of the table, starting with your top local expert? So first we have Patrick. If you're buying in Germany, that's Patrick. First you have Patrick on your side, and then who else do we need on that side of the table?
You mean to find the best deal?
Yes, I mean you need to have your own team, right? You need to have your real estate advisor. You need to have your own attorney. How
Yeah,
about title experts? Tell us a little bit about that.
yeah. So I would definitely add somebody who is an expert in the mortgage
Okay.
because this is an important part. The good story is I can also do that.
Oh, that's amazing. You see, this is exactly why you have to connect with it. Okay.
Yeah. Then also you need a good notary because in Germany you can't buy without a notary. And by good, I don't mean a cheap one because in Germany it's a fixed price, so it
Okay.
doesn't really matter whether you go to A, B, or C. But of course, you get, and I would definitely take someone who is super flexible, also gives you maybe some tips and so on the sales contract,
Right.
because there can be also done lots of mistakes.
And
An
this
attorney, as you said.
yes, so we're talking about the real estate advisor, broker, and now we're talking about the attorney, right? And that attorney, you
Hmm.
can pay him, I'm assuming, the same way that you would one here in New York, which is per hour or fixed rate. And you're advising find a good attorney that has a fixed rate, right?
Um, it doesn't really matter. Um, sometimes you don't even need the attorney. But take one who is an expert on the specific field. So in Germany, you have attorneys on rental issues, for example. So if you want to increase the rent, you have on all sides of things that you need to consider, you can have attorneys. But most of the time, you don't really need them. And most of them, they ask for not for a fixed amount, but rather flexible, depending on the hours.
Well, that's fantastic. So it sounds so far that we need the real estate advisor, you need your attorney, you need someone who is an expert on mortgages. That's very important too. Patrick happens to be one of those people. And who else do we need? Is there so far we have 3 people on the table. Do we need anybody else? I mean, you've been sitting, you've closed many transactions. So who do you usually see on the side of the investor?
So I would also add somebody on a tax advisor.
Yes, a tax advisor. That's huge. Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely huge because I mean, in the end, you have to pay the taxes for the property, but
That's
afterwards, you also have to pay taxes on the rent and so on. And there, it definitely makes sense to consider whether you, for example, want to buy it privately, or if you want to put that property in a legal entity, so to say. And there you also have a really broad field of how you can structure deals.
Thank you. It's been such an amazing. Just before we close, I do have to ask, when I visit, by the way, I've been in Germany. I was in Berlin once. Absolutely love the city. The food was unbelievable. But if someone is visiting, what would be that dish that we must try if we go to Germany?
The must dish?
Oh, yes, like food. That's a loaded question.
A good question. So I'm an expert in real estate. I'm not sure if people trust me on food. Okay. But can I also tell a few ones?
Yes, please.
Okay. So if you want to go for cheap food and fast food, then go for kebab. Okay. That's definitely something you have to do. Then traditional food is also always super nice. And on top of that, well, Berlin is super international in terms of food, so
it is.
just try things out, I would say.
Absolutely.
We also have really, really nice Michelin restaurants. So I would definitely put one of those restaurants on the bucket list.
Oh, you're making me hungry already. All right. Well, Patrick Breuer, thank you so much for joining us today. Please, if you like this, whether you're listening via podcast or on YouTube, remember to subscribe. I have amazing guests from all over the world, all of them very knowledgeable. And Patrick, again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Carolina, for the invitation and also being able to share the story here. Let's catch up on LinkedIn, and I wish you all the best to you. And make a lot of deals in New York.
Let's make a lot of deals. Thank you. And to all of you, we'll see you soon. Ciao.